Hi class, today we're going to talk about chapter 15, the Phoenicians from the Story of the World. In this video, we will be reviewing chapter 15, talking about just an overview of the Phoenicians, and then ships and sailors, trade, and the alphabet. So typically in videos, I try to teach chronologically about certain events and peoples. Instead, I'm going to be talking topically this time, kind of like we did when we talked about the Harappan civilization. So let's start with chapter 15 review. So in chapter 15.1, the Phoenician traders, you learned about the Phoenicians and how they lived in Canaan, and they were the greatest sailors in the ancient world. In the northern part of Canaan, you could not grow wheat, you couldn't raise animals because of the landscape, and so instead they became sailors. You learned how, as sailors, they traded cedar, they made furniture, they traded salt, dried fish, embroidered cloth, tin, metal, glass, things they made with glass, specifically blown glass, which you read about that process, and then purple dye, the color of kings. In 15.2, the founding of Carthage, you learn about how Phoenicians started different colonies. You learn about Tyre and Carthage, and you can see them right here. Here's Carthage right here, and here's Tyre right here. And Carthage was in North Africa. It was settled in 814 BC, and it became a huge city. And then you read about Virgil's story about Carthage, about how the myth of it goes that there was a princess named Dido, and she runs away from the king in Tyre because this king kills her husband. She takes her friends to this island and she tricks a person into selling her this entire island. She's very clever, by the way, and this becomes Carthage. So let's talk about the Phoenicians. I want to just give you an overview about who they were. So the Phoenicians were a Semitic people group. We've learned about a lot of different Semitic people groups: Akkadians, Amorites, Hyksos, the Israelites, now the Phoenicians. They were different though than, say, Egypt, because they did not have a country. They didn't necessarily have a king. All of their cities were independent city-states. So in Egypt, you have a lot of cities, but they're all ruled, not during the intermediate periods, but for the most part, they're ruled by a pharaoh. There's a central government. With the Phoenicians, they just had independent city-states all along the Mediterranean Sea, like I showed you on that map, and I'll show you again in a second, but they're united by culture and they're united by language. They're not united by one strong king. Their city-states were firmly established by 2750 BC. So here is the commercial network of the Phoenicians. So again, it's the same map, but here's Carthage right here, and here's Tyre that you read about right here. And then you can see all of their different trade routes in the red. So ships and sailors, masters of the sea. So the Phoenician sailors were the greatest mariners in ancient history. Their land is dry and hilly with very few natural resources, like you read about. And so instead of focusing on agriculture or focusing on natural resources, they become seafaring traders. So they become merchants, sailors, and shipbuilders, and they built a civilization without relying on agriculture, which is pretty significant. By 900 BC, the Phoenicians dominated Mediterranean trade. Like, they were the ones doing it all there. Tyre and Sidon were the largest cities, and they were considered the centers of trade in that region. They then build trading colonies, and remember, a colony is a region controlled by a distant country. And Carthage is one of the trading colonies in North Africa. So here's a picture of what a Phoenician ship might look like, and I'm going to just read to you these little descriptions. So we're going to start right up here. It says merchant ships. Phoenician sailors developed the round boat, a ship that was very wide and had rounded bottom. The ship created a large space for cargo. It says Phoenician ships often were decorated with horse heads. This wicker fence runs along the outer edge of the upper deck. Foreigners wanted cedar, an aromatic wood that grew in Phoenicia. These pottery jars with pointed bottoms were called amphorae. They held oil or wine. And the most desired Phoenician trade item was dyed red purple cloth. So here's a couple pictures of what these ships probably look like. And here is an engraving of one of the ships. So now let's talk about trade. So the Phoenicians created a network of colonies and different trade centers, and they were the greatest trading power in the world. They imported what they needed, meaning what they couldn't get themselves, they got from other places, and they exported what they made, and they also acted as middlemen traders between civilizations. So if one civilization is just like, I want what this civilization had, the Phoenicians were the ones carrying them back and forth between these different civilizations and making money doing that. Mark Cartwright from the Ancient History Encyclopedia says the Phoenicians were the equivalent of the international haulage trucks of today. It kind of makes me think of U-Hauls because we recently moved, and I don't even remember how many times we rented a U-Haul to get different things places. But just imagine that, you know, like U-Hauls are everywhere, like every city, and imagine like one people group being the ones that ran that, like the Phoenicians, and that's kind of what they were like. Isaiah 23:8 says, who has purposed this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were the honored of the earth. So high praise for Tyre, the traders of Tyre in the Bible. And then wood. So they exported wood, specifically cedar and fir. They were famous for their wood. They traded with Mesopotamia, with Egypt. King Solomon used this wood to build his temple. Herod uses this to build Zerubbabel's temple. And they also exported textiles, wool, linen, yarn, cotton, and silk. However, their most famous is their cloth dyed purple. And I'm going to just run through the process with you really quickly. So there was these shellfish in deep water, and they would catch them in baited traps. They would let the shellfish bake in the sun, and then they would extract their fluid, which was the dye. Then they needed at least 1,000 for one cloak. 1,000 shells for one cloak, which I'm sure then you can imagine why they were so very expensive, and how purple became equated with the color of royalty, because only royalty and people who were very rich, wealthy, could afford this purple cloth. Mark Cartwright says cloth dyed purple using fluid from the murex shells brought the Phoenicians fame throughout the ancient world. So I want you to go watch this. This is a video by Absolute History called The Revolting Process of Making Things Purple. Worst jobs in the world in history. And it goes through the process. It's about 5 minutes long. Goes through the process of what it looks like. Like they actually do it to get purple cloth. And I want you to see it because it's so fascinating, slightly gross, but I think you can all stomach it. And then glass, so you read about the process of making glass. I want you to go watch this video, and I know it's a little bit dumb to watch a video that's telling you to go watch these videos, but guys, like I don't know how to, I'm not gonna go catch shellfish and dye it to show you how to do it, and I'm not going to just show you pictures of glass making. Like you should actually see what it's like. And so this is just like a 1 minute video, I think, and it's called What the Ancient Art of Glass Blowing Actually Looked Like. And so go watch it and enlighten yourself. Okay, so then let's talk about the alphabet. So the Phoenicians were the first to use an alphabet, and when I talk about an alphabet, I mean that every letter represents a sound in that language. And the Phoenician alphabet had 22 letters, and this is opposed to when one symbol represents a word, like you had in Egypt with hieroglyphics, like you have in China with their writing system. And so to have one letter represent a sound, which was much simpler, and it increased literacy drastically. It would also influence other major writing systems. So here is their alphabet and what it looked like. And do you guys remember this? This is a slide that I had from my first writing video on chapter 3, but this was to show you the legacy of the hieroglyphs, and I want to show it to you again. So remember we talked about the hieroglyphs and how Proto-Sinaitic borrowed almost half of the signs from the hieroglyphs, and then the Phoenicians used the Proto-Sinaitic letters in their alphabet. And the Greeks borrowed the Phoenician alphabet, turned it sideways. The Romans borrowed the Greek alphabet, and the Roman alphabet is the most widely used alphabet in the world today, which is what we use. And so I just wanted you to see the Phoenicians, how they fit into that, to that development. So that's all I have for you. Thanks for watching. Make sure you watch those videos that I linked on making purple dye and glass blowing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.